Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Women who have children can be paid up to a third less than men by the time their first child is 12. That's according to new figures from the think tank, the Institute for Fiscal Studies. It found that while the gender pay gap in general has been falling in recent years, mothers who take time out or work fewer hours miss out significantly on wage increases. Here's our economics editor, Kamal Ahmed.
The ups and major downs of the gender wage gap. Yes, it has been reducing overall, but for mothers and graduates there is still a significant pay penalty. In this London park, opinions were clear. Having children presented major career challenges, ones that men often steer well clear of.
Women struggle with the issue of having to be perfect mothers at home and then having to be perfect in their career.
I've taken a pay cut because I've changed my career and I've changed my hours. So I don't think that's a gender issue, it's my choice.
The gender wage gap has been declining. In 1993, there was a 28% difference in the hourly income of men and women. That has now fallen to 18%. But there are significant variations. For mothers, the wage gap grows to 33% by the time the first child reaches 12 years old.
What happens when women reduce their hours of paid work? For whatever reason, at that point, a lot of them find that wage progression shuts down. Now, that could be because they are genuinely not gathering the skills and experience that employers value in those kinds of jobs. It could be something to do with some form of discrimination or power that employers are exercising over those women in holding down their wages.
She is showing them the correct way to polish.
The workplace has certainly changed since the 1940s, but the persistent wage gap is still with us. Before a family arrives, there is already a 10% difference in income. Some people argue that at least part of the gender pay gap is down to choice, mothers making the decision to leave work to look after their children. But although that may partially be true, is it really a choice when childcare is so prohibitively expensive for many? Is it really a choice when flexible working is not valued as highly by many businesses as traditional 9-to-5 working? And is it really a choice when mothers return to work that they miss out on future promotions?
We have about 750 employees, of which about 70% are women.
Laura Tennyson runs a mother and child clothing firm. She encourages employees, men and women, to work flexible hours and welcomes parents back to the office.
If you have been a full-time parent or been working in a less demanding job for a few years whilst your children are young, you've still got a huge amount to offer. And I'm very keen on employing people who've had their babies and are keen to come back into the workforce and really progress.
The government says it is acting. Businesses will be forced to publish the pay rates for men and women. More shared parental leave is available. But end the pay gap in a generation? That lofty target is still a long way from being hit. Kamal Ahmed, BBC News.
Now, new figures from the Institute for Fiscal Studies show that the pay gap between men and women is coming down, from an average 28% in 1993 to 18% now. But they also suggest that once women start a family, the gap rises further and further until it reaches 33% by the time the child is 12. Our social affairs editor, Jackie Long, has this.
Meet Leo and his big sister Rosa. Their mum Rebecca doesn't need a report to tell her about the gender pay gap. She's living it.
Well, my partner and I have similar jobs and similar levels of seniority. I want to go back part-time because I didn't want the children to be in childcare sort of full-time, and I want to spend more time with them. So obviously, as I've been a part-time worker and also taken 2 years out of my working life to have children, then obviously his salary has increased while mine hasn't, purely because of the logistics of that.
And how do you feel about that?
That's an interesting question. I've had a choice to go 3 days a week, but sometimes it can feel unfair, I suppose.
For other parents at the playgroup today, the idea of paying a price for taking time out at work to look after children came as little surprise.
I actually just really enjoy being a mum, so but it's not surprising, I don't think. that it is a shame.
But a fact of life, you think, that can't be changed?
Yeah,
or won't be changed?
Hopefully it will be changed when you see more fathers taking part and getting paternity leave and everything.
Do you think that would make a difference?
Oh yeah, absolutely, massively, definitely.
For most women, it's not that they're paid less per hour when they return to work part-time. It's much less blatant than that. It is that over the years following the birth of their first child, their pay continually lags behind that of men. It rises less quickly and they're much more likely to be overlooked for promotion. The report says in the end, that can have a massive impact on their earnings.
The Institute for Fiscal Studies says the gap in average hourly wages between men and women is falling. Currently, hourly pay rates for women are around 18% lower than for men. The pay gap starts to widen after their first baby is born. Women lose on average 2% in their earnings for every year they stay out of work. Over the 12 years after their first child, their hourly pay rate lags behind until it is on average 33% less than men. But some analysts questioned the IFS figures, saying any pay gap is nothing to do with gender.
For men and women, if they take time out of work, that will inevitably reduce their career opportunities and their pay increase opportunities, whether that be for familial reasons or for a more work-life balance. When you then come back into the working world, I think you have to expect that those pay opportunities are going to be less than what would have been if you'd stayed in.
Just tough.
Yeah, I think so. Well, not tough. I think it's more a case of it's an individual choice, and they're positive choices.
Making sure little girls have the chance to earn the same as men when they grow up is a priority, say the government. Next year it will begin forcing larger employers to reveal how much men and women are paid and where the biggest gaps are.
Jackie Long.
Now for a story that probably won't surprise an awful lot of people watching this programme. According to researchers at the Institute for Fiscal Studies, women with children are still paid around a third less an hour than men. This is a frequently debated issue. It doesn't seem to be shifting much, if at all. So what is the answer?
Women have been campaigning for equal pay for around 50 years. Yet women and men still don't earn the same as each other. And the gap is worse if you're a mother, especially one with A-levels or a degree. At the accountancy and consultancy firm PwC, around 40% of the executive board are women. Over a quarter of those made partner this year were female. But senior women there don't believe the battle is fully won.
I think there's no doubt that my career hasn't advanced as quickly as it might have done because I took time off to look after my child.
Having been on 3 maternities, I know that you are quite often sidelined when it comes to salary increases because they only happen once a year.
So how bad is the situation for women with children? Before children come along, the wage gap hovers around 10%. But look what happens after the birth of the first child. The gap shoots up, getting wider every year, and by the time the child is 15, its mother is paid on average 33% less than her male peers. Is it fair that taking time out of the workplace comes at such a high cost? Some think it is.
For men and women, if they take time out of work, that will inevitably reduce their career opportunities and their pay increase opportunities, whether that be for familial reasons or for a more work-life balance. When you then come back into the working world, I think you have to expect that those pay opportunities are going to be less than what would have been if you'd stayed in.
But surely women can reskill quickly after maternity leave, and for many, taking time off after giving birth isn't a choice. Affordable childcare is hard to secure. It's still mostly mothers who look after the kids.
How important is it to have the right partner if you want to have a high-flying career and children?
If you don't have that support at home, quite quickly it can all kind of crumble beneath you. So that the support is absolutely fundamental for you to be able to, or to feel, in fact, that you can have a career and be, a mother and a wife at the same time.
But even with a supportive partner or employer, the same pay as a male colleague isn't guaranteed. To avoid the mummy penalty, women have to push hard to ensure they're paid what they're worth. If you don't ask, you'll never get. Narina Hertz, News at 10.
So out of interest, how badly do we fare compared to the rest of the world? Well, the lowest gender pay gap is actually in New Zealand at just over 5.5%. In Europe, Belgium leads the way, while it's also lower in Norway and Denmark. To improve their figures, Sweden decided to introduce a daddy quota 20 years ago, 3 months paid paternity leave for men that they either use or lose. But the pay gap there is still more than 15%, only 2% lower than here.
Now, a new study of men, women and the labour market was published this morning. It's from the Institute for Fiscal Studies, who are very good at making sense of huge data sets, and the report confirms what we perhaps knew, that women earn less than men. But there's more to say about it than that. There are 3 basic takeaway facts here. The first is this: the wage gap between childless women and men is about 10%. The men have hourly wages that are about 10% higher than the women. And that's a pretty significant gender disparity. It's not clear what the cause is. This is not different pay for the same work. It could be that women gravitate towards different occupations that are lower paid, or it may be that society's tended to pay so-called women's jobs like nursing less than so-called men's jobs like trucking. But it is a gender disparity. Now, the second point is that on top of this is a bigger disparity that affects women massively. It is a child-rearing penalty. So here is the wage gap in relation to the birth of a first child. Before the child, the gap, you can see it there, is about 10%. And then in the later years, after the first child, well, you can see the gap grows massively. 12 years after their firstborn, the wage gap between men and women is about 33%, which is huge. In fact, for every year taken out of the workplace, the woman's salary when she returns is 2% lower than it would otherwise have been. Now, that you can call the price of taking time out. There is a third point to make, though, which is that the wage gap is bigger at the more educated end of the labour market. For people with A-levels or a university degree, the wage penalty of taking out time is much more severe than for people with lower qualifications. Of course, top-end jobs are better paid, but they're more better paid for men than for women. So 2 questions leap out of all of this for me. Why is the penalty of looking after children quite as large as it is? And why is there that core 10% gender wage gap, even when children are nowhere in the room? Well, one country that has a smaller than average gap is Sweden. It has long been seen as a beacon of equal opportunity. And joining us now is Ylva Johansson, joining us, yes, from Sweden, Minister for Labour there. Very good evening to you. Thanks for joining us. What do you think it takes to get that wage gap down? What's the most powerful and effective tool?
I think the first thing is that you have to be very persistent and very decisive that you will reach a 100% equal pay, and you would not be satisfied with less. But to be more pragmatic, I think that it must be easy to combine family and working life. And I think that's one of the things that we've done quite good in Sweden. We have a high fertility rate, and almost all women work. We have a very high employment rate among both men and women. There is still a gap of 4%, but that's smaller and smaller each year. So I think we will reach equal level of employment rate between men and women, and this is important.
Right, but I was looking at the OECD statistics, the pretty respected kind of international comparisons, because you still have a pretty big wage gap. I mean, you were world leaders at one point, and now you're still around 15% or so in the wage gap. Why do you think, even when you have a government that calls itself a feminist government, why do you think you still cannot get rid of that last 15%?
It's coming closer. It's 12.5 right now, and when we take into account these things that can be explained by different levels of education and different ages, it's still a gap between 4.5%. But I think we have to do more. That's why we passed a law saying that all employers have to do an equal pay gap review every year at the workplace, and all employers also have to have an action plan how to get rid of the equal pay gap. And I think this is one important tool that you can use on each workplace.
Don't you think you need to talk to the Swedish men? Because you've got very generous a parental leave for when people have children. I think it's 16 months between the mother and the father. It's the women who take most of that, though,
Yes,
isn't
it
it?
is.
Yeah, 3/4 of it is women and a quarter men.
Yes, that's correct. And that's why we just passed a new law saying that we will have an earmark 3 months for the mother and 3 months for the father, or if there are same-sex parents, 3 months for one parent and 3 months for the other. And I think this will really help to have a more equal use of the parental leave. And I think we have to go on month by month until we reach an equal level of the parental leave.
But do you think the wage gap that you still have, is that what I would call a gender gap, or is that a child-rearing gap? Is that the punishment, if you like, for a woman coming out of the labour market and then coming back in? Or is it, do you think, about sexism at work or the way we respect men's jobs differently to women's jobs?
It's not that easy. I should say that you're not punished because you have children, because it's quite easy to have children in Sweden. We have a very good, high quality, affordable childcare for all children, and we have this generous parental leave. And we can also see that women with high income, high level of education have more children than those with a low level. So this is not really that easy, but you can see that we're still having a division in the labour market where women tend to work more with caring, working with people, and you tend to be paid less if you work with people than if you work with machines or technology. So I think that is one reason. And another reason is that a lot of women work in sectors where they are not allowed to be full-time working. So they are working 80% or 85% or something, but they still would like to work 100%. And this is one of the most important issues for the Swedish unions to fight for.
Yes, the part-time, full-time and the different occupations, caring occupations being underpaid. Very interesting. Thank you very much. Ylva Johansson, thanks very much indeed. Thanks.
I've been getting